I think most of the folks in this place, all of the folks in this place are familiar with this place, right? Any newcomers tonight? Anybody? We got one newcomer. Welcome. Welcome to the Larry Edmunds Bookshop. We're
folks here.
70.
Is this the first time you're in the store?
Hers.
Yeah.
Oh, well, welcome. We are a 78-year-old bookstore, still living and breathing in the 21st century. We're made of bricks and mortar.
This young lady worked for Entertainment Tonight. She worked at Paramount.
Yes, I heard that. Welcome for Paramount tonight on Hollywood Boulevard for you. We specialize in posters and photos and all kinds of fun stuff here in Hollywood. And we are here because we, and me in particular, love what we do. And we have a lot of fun shows at the Egyptian. We have shows at the Arrow. We have shows at the Alex. We have a Facebook page you can look up on Larry Edmunds. There's an email list up there if you want to sign out. You'll find out about all of our good events, like our event tonight with Marc and Michael. We've got a bunch of awesome stuff coming up for the TCM Festival starting in about 2 weeks. We're going to kick it off with our first ever show at the Hollywood Heritage on Wednesday the 27th. Jay Jorgensen will be there with his fashion book, Creating the Illusion. And then over the course of the next 3 or 4 days there or in the store, we will have Ileana Douglas and Friends, which is a repeat show, which was fantastic here. It'll be a Sunday morning special, and last time she brought Tom Arnold and Jennifer Tilly, and we had a great time. I'll also have book signings for the festival, Carl Reiner, the screening for Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid, Rita Moreno. My friend Carrie Beecham's doing a reading with Nancy Olson from Sunset Boulevard and a bunch of people. So a lot of good stuff. So look on one of our sites and you will find out about it. I am always pleased to introduce our guests that are here tonight.
I wouldn't introduce him yet because he's having technical difficulties.
Oh, okay. All of a sudden.
So,
well, I'm not going to...
in show business, we go like this. Stretch it.
See, I didn't look at my stage manager early enough. So I don't know.
Just bear with me. All of a sudden,
What's the other
You
one?
can go. Sing a song. Yeah. We had it up, and it was
Everything
working
is
fine.
fine.
And we went through everything.
Some of
Went through
those
it, working
machines, you have to plug one thing in first and then the other, and if you turn it off, it messes it up.
yeah. All right, I will.
But I don't know
turn it off.
which is
Hold on.
which.
All right. Well, you can start talking, I guess, about the history of the book, and I'll figure this out.
Well, and I can say, as Marc tries to figure it out, we're going to watch this lovely presentation on this lovely screen. And I always tell the story of the screen, which is Marc and Robert Noodlebin did the first ever book signing I did in here in 2007. And Marc brought in his wonderful photographs, and we showed them on 3 sheets that I tacked to the balcony. And they went to a theater trade show not long after that and came back and brought me this beautiful screen that you'll be watching the show on tonight. And it's been up there ever since. So I always like to thank Marc when he comes in here. For and all of Hollywood and all of you historians all owe a debt to Marc and his tireless service to the Hollywood community here. I would also like to
You're looking
introduce...
at my butt.
I would also like to introduce our other co-author tonight, Michael Christaldi, who's back here for the second time.
Somebody I'm watching this presentation on dirty sheets.
Yeah, well, they weren't dirty. I washed them.
Jeff, this lady has a question.
Yes.
So where do you get all your books?
Oh, we've been doing this a long time. I get books everywhere.
Everywhere?
People call and ask me that. Ask me if I want to get them every day, every single day.
And so what makes you say, yes, this is a book that I'm going to want?
Just depends on if I need it. If I sold it, I've been doing this for 28 years now, so I kind of know the ones I like and I don't like anymore.
Okay.
I
Sell.
Right.
I got it. Yeah. Ones that I buy that sit here for a long time. If you come in and say, I have a lot of the books that are on your shelf, those probably aren't the ones that I want to buy.
Okay.
If you don't see them, there's a better chance.
Did you sell any Patty Duke?
Another question. I had a limited number, but I did spend last Sunday evening with Kenneth Turan, who wrote that book with Patty. So we got to talk briefly about that. That was one of his earlier books, and he had, of course, had some wonderful things to say because everybody had nice things to say about her. She was very, very beloved. And that's why my Valley of the Dolls poster has stayed up in tribute.
Oh.
So
Got it.
we kept it up there
I
for
got
her.
it.
Got it.
And now, ladies and gentlemen,
Now we got it. Give 'em the
Michael
cut.
Christaldi!
You're right. You have to shut the. Everything has to be rebooted.
Write down what you did, Mark, so you'll remember next
I
time.
have it all here, but I never have to reboot.
As you can see, we're very informal here.
I'm used to a slideshow, a slide projector,
And,
technology.
The old days.
All right.
well,
Begin.
we want to thank everybody first for coming in, and I'm glad that you're as enthusiastic about Paramount Studios as we are, because both Mark and I, it's
I
our
wore my hat, my 100-year anniversary hat.
favorite studio.
1912.
Very cool.
And was a lot of people asked me, including one of the vice presidents who I saw today, and he came over to buy the book, and he said, "Why did you decide to write 2 books about Paramount Pictures?" And I said, when I was a kid back in New Jersey, all my favorite TV shows were Paramount shows. At the end, the logo would come up with Paramount Studios. And all my favorite movies, they had that Paramount logo. So I always associated Paramount Pictures with Hollywood and show business. So when I first came to Los Angeles in the late 80s, and we were taking a ride, I was with some buddies, we were at some type of convention in Las Vegas, business convention, and the guy that was with us said, "Hey, you want to spend a couple days in LA before we head back?" And we did it, and I drive past, and there's Paramount Pictures, the most beautiful studio I thought that I saw. So another guy that we know that was involved with Warner Brothers book that Marc did, I said, "Why don't you do a book about Paramount Pictures?" I said, "Because not a lot's been done, because there's a lot of history there, but it's not as easy as the Warner Brothers, who was just a group of brothers. Jack Warner was the head. They bought the studio and they owned it for many years. Paramount, there was a lot of give and take with guys, except for Adolf Zucker, who was a real genius, and we'll talk a little bit about him." So this presentation really combines both the books that we did, the early history, as well as 1940 to 2000, which is the latest book. And Adolf Zucker was a real genius. I mean, here's a guy that came here, he only had pocket change and some bills sewn into his jacket, worked his way up. He loved games of chance, and he was a furrier, made a lot of money in the furrier business, befriended Marcus Lowe, who lived on the same block as him, which is the Lowe's theater chains that we see still. And he was became a partner in MGM. And these guys approached them about investing in these arcades, which had, like arcades that we were familiar with when we were younger, skee-ball, pinball, different games of chance, things like that. One of the things in this arcade was, you put a penny in, you flip these cards, and it was like a moving picture. Zucker was just amazed by this. Edison was inventing the camera, and he opened the theater couple doors away from the arcade, start showing these, films, short films, a couple of minutes long, and he was charging people a nickel to get in to see them. And from there, he thought people are going to see plays, and they're sitting there for a couple hours watching the play. They'll sit there and watch a movie for a couple hours, and everybody thought he was nuts, because at that point, vaudeville was coming in, and they were using these short films to chase people out of the theaters between the vaudeville acts. So Zucker tells Marcus Lowe, these guys in France are making a film called Queen Elizabeth. They need $50,000, and I'm going to invest in it. Lowe tells Zucker's wife, your husband lost his mind, and his money's going to follow. Nobody wants to see a movie more than 12 minutes long. He invests in Queen Elizabeth, obtains the American rights to the film, and it's a huge hit. He premieres at the Lyceum Theater in New York, which is a theater that's still there, and they perform Broadway shows in. Big hit. Right away, he options the play Prisoner of Zenda, puts that into production as a film, and he's off and running. Well, now everybody is like, people are going to go see movies for a couple of hours, and they start making films, including Jesse Lasky, and we'll talk about the rest of that from here. But you should go to the next slide, if you could. And then that's the first book, Early Paramount Studios, which covers Paramount's history from Adolf Zucker in Hungary up until 1939. Originally, we wanted to do the whole history, and there's all the guys right there. So you have Jesse Lasky on the left, Adolf Zucker sitting down next to him, Samuel Goldwyn, who was not involved very long.
His name was Goldfish.
Goldfish, and he changed it. And Cecil B. DeMille, and Al Kaufman was Adolf Zucker's brother-in-law, who was not, he was just a manager for them of the theaters. Now the interesting thing about this is when they these guys combined their two companies, Zucker and Jesse Lasky, Goldwyn, or Goldfish, was Lasky's brother-in-law. So Lasky is married to Goldwyn's sister, and DeMille's the other partner. In New York DeMille comes out here, he's out here on Selma and Vine in the barn making movies. Lasky's doing whatever he's doing, producing, he's more hands-on, and Zucker and Goldwyn are in the same office. After a month, Zucker can't put up with Goldwyn anymore. He's had it. So he calls Lasky, and he said, I know we partnered up. He said, but I can't work with your brother-in-law. He says, so you and DeMille have to decide who you want to work with. He says, I can't decide. He says, but you need to make a decision. You need to make a decision quick. Either it's going to be me. He says, I understand. If you want to work with your brother-in-law, he says, I'll go out and start my own company. Lasky calls DeMille, and they discuss it, and they decide Goldwyn's out. So they call Zucker back, and they say, Goldwyn's out. We want to work with you. I said, God knows how that conversation went with Lasky and his wife when he got into bed that night. You fired my brother for this guy? So Goldwyn leaves. He goes over to MGM. He's the G in the MGM. Those guys can't work with him either, and he winds up on his own, and he opens the Goldwyn Studios, which is still down here next to the Formosa Cafe. Zucker, Lasky, and DeMille are partnered up. This guy, William Hodgkinson, he owns a distribution company because at that point, you couldn't get your films distributed throughout the country. It was only regionally that the films were being shown, and they wanted to make more money. So this guy, W.W. Hodgkinson, he creates what they call the Paramount Pictures Corporation. It was a distribution company where Zucker and Lasky were the main contributors. Hodgkinson would take 30%, they would keep 70%, and he would distribute the films for them. And there was a bunch of other companies that were making films, and they would also have to contribute 1 or 2 films a year. Zucker didn't like splitting money with anybody. So every time he talked to Jesse Lasky, he would never call Hodgkinson by his name. He would only refer to him as the guy that we're giving 30% to. So what Zucker does is he buys up all the other stock from the smaller stockholders. He calls a meeting with Hodgkinson, and Hodgkins comes in and he says, let's have a vote on who's going to run this company. So Hodgkins thinks, it's my company. I know I'm going to, these other people I know. Well, Zucker owns all the stock now. When they take the vote, Hodgkins is out. So they oust him from his own company. So now he put Barney Balaban in, and Balaban's running the company, Paramount Pictures Corp, and him and Lasky, so they decide we're going to partner up, and everything becomes Famous Players, Jesse Lasky, Paramount. But it was too much of a mouthful. Zucker was so powerful that everything on the West Coast they decided would be a Jesse Lasky production. Everything produced on the East Coast would be an Adolf Zucker produced film. Lasky is seeing his name more on the screen than he's seeing Zucker's because more films are being made out west than are in New York. Lasky gets nervous and he calls Zucker and he goes, why don't we make everything just a Famous Players Lasky? Because he figures next thing you know, Zucker's going to get rid of him. So everything was Famous Player Lasky, distributed by Paramount, and it was too much of a mouthful. So then they just decided on the Paramount Pictures Corporation. And in the first book, you'll see pictures of the Marathon Street building, and you'll see pictures, the name on the building will have changed. It'll say like Famous Players Lasky, Paramount Corp. then you'll see it'll just say Paramount Pictures Corp, Paramount Pictures Inc. because of the different steps that the company took once it went through these growing pains. And then everything just became Paramount Pictures.
Is it conceivable that this portrait would have been taken in New York, or would these 5 people only have been together in Los Angeles?
New York.
It had to be in New York.
New York's main office always was, still is.
Yeah, if you're ever in New York, it's a Hard Rock Cafe now, but the Paramount building is still there, and you can see a picture of it in the book. But that the sign had like all little light bulbs on it. That sign is still on the building. If you walk across the street and look over at the building, it still says Paramount across the building. And if you're a Martin and Lewis fan, you ever see the like A&E biography on them, there's a great live video of them in that building, and they're throwing pictures of themselves out. There's people all over the street, and they're throwing pictures of themselves out the window.
Like 100,000 people.
And that's
the Eagles was the only thing that was ever that big.
that's
right.
the Paramount building. But Al Kaufman, he managed the theaters in New York, and like I said, Goldwyn and Zucker, Zucker mainly stayed in New York, and Goldwyn was in there too. So that had to be in New York because Goldwyn wasn't there that long before he had to leave. So.
And when is this roughly time frame wise?
1912 to 1916. That's when the whole thing started. Zucker started his company in 1912. Lasky started his company in 1913. The Squaw Man, which was a film that Lasky did, came out in February 17th, which was my birthday, in 1914. And that film made with $150,000 in 1914 money. So you could imagine how much, and people are paying like a nickel or a dime to go to the theater. So that's how many people saw this movie. So right away, once the Squaw Man made all this money, they started getting all these other films. They paid $250 a month to rent that barn, which I could not believe that it was that amount of money, because I'm thinking, like, in 1913, $250 a month was a lot of money. But I actually saw the contract that they had to have it at the Hollywood Heritage.
It wasn't just the barn, it was property. It was 2 square city blocks for $250. But they said $250 for the barn rental. But
right, but it was the entire
2 square city blocks.
Right. I wonder if we can get that now.
I don't think
These.
so. Anyway, what Michael did was to condense a 2-hour lecture of mine into about 5 or 6 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Because that is highly condensed. It is very complicated. What he said, he really boiled it down beautifully to just easily to understand, but it's highly more complicated.
There's a lot
than
more
what he said.
detail.
Lots
in
of
it.
detail, dates, and complications of why, motivations, and why they would do this or why they would do that, and you really covered it pretty well in a short time.
Go
because
through
we can't
the
be here
whole-
all night.
To go through the whole thing,
I could do it.
to go through the whole thing, we'd have to order out for food and get blankets and pillows.
That's
in.
fine.
No,
And
really,
then-
he really boiled it down beautifully, and that's the reason I bring that up, is that this book is a boiled down, squeezed down version of the history of Paramount, and it's 2 books, as we said, the early Paramount and this book, in 2 volumes, because Arcadia Press, it's a formula book. It's how many pages is it?
Like 200 pages.
200 something pages,
I think.
and 210
Two-
pictures per
200,
book.
yeah, they limit you.
Right,
how many
that's it.
pictures.
So I gave him, I don't know, 1,000 pictures,
Yeah.
which I said, you choose. That was something, and he had to choose because I'm too close to it. I'm more of an academic on this subject. He coming from another point of view of what most people would want to see, maybe. With me, I want to put all of the pictures in the book, but it's impossible. So anyway, these books are actually a really good guidebook. So we've discussed it, and we're going to do a book on Paramount, a big book, which will be not really focusing on this history of Zukor and all this, but the behind the scenes of Paramount.
A lot
all
of
the candid
candid
shots, the
photos
production,
and things
the
like
stars, the famous people that visited the studios. We'll cover the Vine Street studio, where the barn used to be at Selma and Vine. I'm the curator of the Hollywood Heritage Museum, one of them anyway, and I'm one of the people that actually walked the barn from Hollywood and Vine to where it is today, across from the bowl. We actually walked it in the middle of the night with big wheels, you know, house moving. And I was actually, in 1979, I was in the office of Bob Goodfried. He was the head of publicity at Paramount, talking about studio history, of course. I was doing an encyclopedia of movie studios at the time, which I'm still doing. And all of a sudden he gets a phone call, and the phone call is from Michael Eisner's office, saying that they're going to demolish the western town, Virginia City, remember, for Bonanza, and they're going to put a parking lot there. And so I could hear Bob say on the phone, "What about the barn?" It was part of the western town. It has a plaque on it. It's a state landmark. They said, "What barn?" And he went, "Oh my God, he hadn't have gotten the call, the bulldozers would have bulldozed the western town and the barn along with it, and the plaque." So he called the Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce paid $30,000 for it to be moved to Vine Street next to the, what's that place called now on Vine, the nightclub?
Redbury?
The Avalon.
Avalon?
The Avalon. And it stayed there. We put a fence around it and stayed there for a while. Hollywood Heritage was born at that time in 1979-80. We took control of the barn, and then about 5 years later, it took 5 years to get all this done, we moved it across from the bowl on county property where it is today. So we are officially a county property museum, I'm proud to say. So that's where it's going to stay. It was at Selma and Vine on the southeast corner. There's now a big building being built there
Next
now
to the
or something.
It's the Montalban.
Is that what that
It used
is?
to be the Huntington Harper.
No, that's across the street. The barn was on the southeast corner, across from all that. Across from the Montalban and all this. It's across the street. It's a new building.
Oh, where Trader Joe's is? Or that
Maybe.
brand new building?
It's a brand new building.
Okay.
Mark, were there any pictures that you were very anxious to have in the first Paramount book that didn't make the cut that you were able to put in this one?
Well,
we're gonna buy tonight?
see, the first book is up to 1939. Excuse
Okay.
me. I was going to say 40. So we had to do another book from 40, and we had to decide, are we going to go to now, or so we picked 2000. We figured up to 2000 is more historical. I mean,
We were going to do
last 15
95,
years.
then we thought rounded off to 2000. And there's so many great pictures and so many great candid photos that it's hard to pick in variations. But they limit you to everything. You know, I wrote about Bob Hope because I had 100 years of life to write about, and they reduced me down to, you know, a short paragraph. And I had a lot written, and we had to cut it out. So, you know, you got to combine with them. But
All right.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So anyway, just to bring up where he left off, 1916. Already by 1916, the two companies had merged. Famous Players, Lasky, and Paramount was formed in 1914 by William W. Hodgkinson, and thus it was Famous Players, Lasky dash Paramount. That was their title. I mean, on their letterhead everywhere. It's all big, long name. By about 1916, 17, 18, 19, but by 1919, they decided to drop all this Famous Players Lasky business. They left the Canadian theater chain as Famous Players. They left that corporate name. That's still up there, by the way, Famous Players theater chain. And they dropped everything else and became Paramount. So everything was Paramount. And thus, they were at Selma and Vine. And in 1919, they built the Astoria studio in New York, in Long Island. And I'll have to give myself credit. I helped save it. And I worked with the planning division of New York City, and we saved the studio, which is now called the Kaufman Astoria Studio, where Woody Allen and all the most famous New York directors have been using it for years to this day. But by 1930,
Was it falling
yes.
into disrepair, or did somebody want to develop?
No, what
the
happened
property?
is they went, in 1929 was the Wall Street crash. By 1932, they lost it. Paramount lost it to the bank. So that's it. It became the East Coast General Studios, the East Coast Service Studios, and on and on and on until the Army took it over during World War II, Army Pictorial Center of New York. And then after the war, they didn't know what to do with it, and it stayed there for almost till when I was there, which was in, God, when was it? 76 or something. And when all this started, the city was interested in saving it. But I tried to save the Biograph studio in the Bronx. I tried to save the Edison studio in the Bronx. And several of us did save the Vitagraph studio in Brooklyn. But I hear now they might demolish it. It's a big problem now. But unfortunately, that was the time, 1977-78, was Fort Apache, the Bronx. I don't mean the movie, I mean the real thing. There was open warfare in the streets in New York in those days. They were firebombing the whole Bronx. The whole Bronx was burned down. I'm serious, like Dresden. If you ever saw pictures of Dresden, Germany, that means all the neighborhoods were leveled. It was open land for miles, back to the time of the 18th century.
Was it gang warfare?
It was gang warfare going on, and the reason they call it Fort Apache, the Bronx, the police and fire would not go into the neighborhoods. They left it alone. The Biograph studio was on 175th Street, sitting there alone, and then I tried to save it. I took all the equipment out of it. I worked on The Wiz, you know, the show The Wiz. And my friend was the sound man on that. And I got Universal to take the equipment and truck it back here to LA. And now it's over at History for Hire in the Valley. So you see it in all these films now, the booms and other stuff that we say.
Let's get back to Melrose.
Yes, I know. We have to get back to Melrose. I'm sorry. No, but I'm saying about
This is all, the Bronx, New York's leading right back to
No, but it's all,
Melrose
listen,
Avenue.
it all has to do with New York and the Paramount. Because Paramount had early studios on 26th Street and all this slowly turned into offices in New York, where all the finance was and everything, leading, of course, to Los Angeles as being their production center. So the reason we're showing this is because Paramount, of course, was involved with theater chains, and the theater chains were very important to them. And this is the Paramount Theater on Pershing Square. It's now gone. It was a fantastically beautiful theater. It was built as the Metropolitan by Sid Grauman, and eventually demolished in the late 50s.
This was the first theater to have a balcony and the first theater to have air conditioning.
What were you going to say?
It was demolished in 1960.
Oh, 60, sorry.
And it was the largest theater in LA. It had 3,400 seats.
It was big.
Right here in Pershing Square.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's now, some building is there now. All right, so anyway, we just wanted to show that. Let's see if this works. Sometimes there was a delay. See, it works.
Now that's
You wanted to talk
Leslie
about
Towns
this?
Hope, and he's out on the Paramount Lot, taking a break in between sets.
No, I better get to the Paramount Lot in Melrose, as you suggested. That's what I'm showing us. Is that famous players Lasky, Paramount, the Lasky Studios, they called it, on Vine Street, they took over 2 square city blocks originally, and the city of Hollywood was growing around. That's Argyle, Sunset, and El Centro, and Selma. So all of this area was encroaching with buildings and houses and everything. They had to get out of there. So in 1926, they purchased the famous United Studios. It wasn't on Marathon, it was on Melrose at the time. And they moved there. And they were there from 1926 until, as they are today. The barn was later, as I said, was moved from 1926 to Paramount Back Lot to be part of that western town, coming full circle now. And it sat there as the studio gym and also as a background for the western town for years.
Yeah.
So this shot just shows you typical, that's what our new book will be about. It will be about the typical days and years of all the stars on the lot, the productions, the directors, producers, the back lot, all the departments, the costume department, every detail we're going to cover in the book on Paramount history. So it'll be a really comprehensive book. So this is a little tiny sample of it.
You see a lot of bikes on the lot, and you still do now, just because people need to get, the lots are so big and they need to get from one place to the other.
This is the Venice Gate, and the studio, it's again complicated, we'll go through it all, but a lot of the frontage, which used to be the United Studio, was sold off, and Paramount then got the city to put in Marathon Street. So when you go to the Paramount Gate, the old Bronson Gate, you have to drive up a block to the gate from Melrose. In the old days, it used to be on Melrose. So funny thing is, in 1985, Paramount repurchased back all the frontage, and all the frontage up and down Van Ness, which used to be apartment houses, and reopened gates and everything as it is today. So this is the Van Ness Gate, which is still there, except it looks different now, of course. Good, it's working. This is stage 5. Now, there are many different stages. This stage was raised. They used to raise the stages when they needed to for different shots or whatever. They'd actually raise the whole stage 6, 10 feet. In Warner Brothers, they raised the stage 50 feet. It was a major thing, and that stage is still there with buttressing holding up the stage. It's incredible what they do. But you can see they're working on the edges there with big holes in the side there. They would put, just like house moving, they would jack it up, put a block in, jack it again, put another block, and that's how they raised the stage. You want to say something about 5?
No.
Okay.
The only thing about stage 5 is, if anybody's a Brady Bunch fan, that's where they shot the entire Brady Bunch series.
That's
Was done
important.
on stage 5. Little bit of television history. And if anybody is a Veep fan, V-E-U-P, the Julie Louis Dreyfus show, they just moved there and they now film on stage 5 at Paramount Studios.
And what did I want to say about that, stage 5 too? Oh yeah, that's right. I remember the Brady Bunch movie that was not too long ago. How long ago was that now? I'm afraid to know. I was the advisor on that because they wanted to shoot on the Paramount Lot, but it had to be 1965. So I was showing the location guy and all the art director guys. Well, this building was there. You don't have to do anything to it. This building, you don't have to do anything to it. In other words, almost every location on the lot they didn't have to touch. It hadn't changed at all since the 30s and the 40s, mind you.
This is a great shot. Well, yeah, I'll just point this out, but this is a great shot of Victor Mature. And you can see the RKO water tower in the background. What's that doing there? But when they shot it, of course, this is a still picture. When they're filming it, they're going to cut that out just to get everything else in. But just shows you, the magic of Hollywood and what you have, that there's, life behind those plastic mountains.
That's a good segue, because Paramount was the United Studios. Next to the United Studios, fronting Gower Street, was the Robertson Cole, FBO, Film Booking Offices, and later RKO Studios. And they separated themselves with one fence, with a couple openings, couple gates. So when the Brunton United Studios, where Paramount was, they had a giant back lot. Villages and western towns and everything you can imagine, European villages. It was monstrous. So RKO would then use those facilities. They'd rent them. All the studios rented each other's back lots. It was one big family. It still is to this day. At Raleigh Studio, where I'm based, we have now, we had Paramount, we have Disney, and we have Paramount and Disney now at rent Raleigh Studios for the Castle and for Major Crimes Unit.
Where your soundstage was, that would have been considered RKO at that time. They were numbered differently when RKO had it.
There were 2 water towers. This one is, you can see the RKO water tower, but you cannot see on the right the Paramount water tower. So in 1967, first of all, 1957, the studio became Desilu, RKO. Okay? 10 years. So in 1967, Lucille Ball sold it to Paramount, Gulf and Western, and they removed the Paramount water tower because it was in the way. They don't need 2 water towers. So that's when the lots were merged, and with 1 water tower. When I was there in the 70s, that RKO sign was still up there. And so by 1985, I convinced the studio to scrape off what was left of that and paint Paramount on it. It cost $250,000 to do that. Who's going to go up there and do that? See what I mean?
For $20,000, I'll do it
Is it,
now. That water tower is the water tower now. If you drive past the studio now, that's the water tower you see. And I'm not talking about physically, but I'm saying that location. So that RKO water tower is currently tonight painted over to say Paramount, but that's the same one. How far to go?
There. It's all right. I think I can do it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the batteries.
I think it's the batteries. If anybody has us again, let's make a deal. If anybody has 2 AA batteries in their purse,
I thought these
you get a
were
free
newer
book.
batteries, but it's been a while since I used this.
You do, Sean.
It's gonna work. Oh, you have them?
That's Cecil B. DeMille in the middle of that mess.
That's right.
This
And that's
is what
his script girl.
And that's a script girl.
And this is for the-
There's a guy marking the scene.
This is for the greatest show ever
You can
told.
see
I mean, the
on
greatest show on earth.
One real car says Ringling on it. So it's the greatest show on earth film that they were doing there.
Now about DeMille, real quickly about DeMille. DeMille had left the studio in 1924. Thomas Ince, his good friend, died, and Thomas Ince's wife wanted to sell his studio in Culver City, which is the Selznick studio, the Culver Studios today. And DeMille was arguing with Zukor and about stages, uses, and money, and all kinds of things. So he left to be his own producer. So he didn't come back until 1932. He was at MGM as well, where he produced some of his early sound films. And he came back to do the Sign of the Cross. And he took over this big, beautiful dressing room building, and which Gloria Swanson was using right after he moved out to build his own unit, two-story unit, which is still on the lot, called the DeMille Building today. So his unit was this DeMille Building, his own gate, and right next to it was his own water tank. It was called the A tank, and he would enclose it. He could enclose it, do all kinds of things with it. He shot many of his water scenes of his films there. You know, Reap the Wild Wind and all these kind of films. And this is one of the biggest stages on the lot. I forgot which one. I think it's the bigger one. It's 11. This was stage 11, which was built in 1927, I think it was. And DeMille then took control. What am I saying? He dominated the studio lot. So, for example, for Samson and Delilah, he had the famous artist, what's his name, Rockwell, paint Victor Mature as Samson. It's a big giant painting, and he had it hanging in the commissary. When there was the anniversary of the Ten Commandments, they had, which we're going to show you, it was a special menu, and everybody signed the menu, and then they printed it, and everybody got a sample menu. You know, it was like a souvenir. So DeMille was the man on that lot. And in 1957, he already had several heart attacks after the Ten Commandments was finished, and his doctor said, "You're going to have to leave the studio and move home," which he did. And he put an elevator in his home. He had a heart condition, and he died in 1959. So he was working on two other films, one about the Boy Scouts and another one about something else, and that was it. He was in his 80s, but early 80s. He could have lived on, but he had this heart condition.
Yeah, Anthony Quinn, who was his
son-in-law,
actually
son-in-law,
finished directing one of the.
Yes, he did, and also Henry Wilcoxon was actor. He was in Cleopatra and Anthony in Cleopatra, and he directed as well. So these young men became his assistants and actually helped him direct and produce his last films. It's really a very wonderful story.
Well,
working?
The bad news is it wasn't the bad ones.
Oh, okay.
There it is.
I don't know.
So.
I hate this technology.
Does anybody know who that guy in the back seat is?
Howard Hughes.
No.
No.
William
Yes, he's on the other side of the
Well,
line.
first tell them the name of the film.
Well, I didn't want to.
Sunset Boulevard.
Yes.
Sunset
Boulevard. All right, let me explain. That's the Isotta Frisotti. That's the car. It's a famous maker and from Italy. And Erich von Stroheim never learned to drive. So basically there was a little guy, a little midget on the underneath him that actually worked the pedals for him. And they drove through the Paramount Gate and all this with this kind of remote control driving going through. And the famous scene, they're at the gate, and the guard comes out, talks to von Stroheim. Norma Desmond is here, and the young guard, and says, "Who's that?" And she built the studio, and she gets all upset. Everybody's upset, and the older guard comes out. "Is that you, Norma?" And they're let in.
Hey, Smitty, you better tell this young guy that there wouldn't be any Paramount Pictures if it wasn't for Norma Desmond.
See, the interesting thing about Sunset Boulevard, it is the fine line between real film history, the real reality, and the mythic film history. And that's why Billy Wilder succeeded, because Gloria Swanson was a big Paramount star, playing Norma Desmond. Erich von Stroheim was a director, of course, and an actor, and actually directed Gloria Swanson in a film. William Holden was already at an age when a writer like his age might have rough time and not make money and try to hustle up money, and it was a rough time in the after the war. So all this film, it jives with when Norma, remember they're sitting and watching films in her house. He says, God, you are big. You're Norma Desmond. Remember she says, what was the line? She says,
I'm still big. It's the movies that got
smaller.
What
a line. What a line, I'm telling you. It's my favorite film.
Two things about this photo. If you see above William Holden's head, you see the boom mic.
Shoot, I have a pointer.
To catch the dialogue, and the building behind it, which is the Dryer building, which was set for to be demolished, and along with some other reconstructions of Paramount. But they're going through some growing pains right now with some of the Redstone.
Hey, hold that slide.
That's Moon Best now is acting boss, and they're saying that the company may be sold. Chinese are looking to buy it. So I'm hoping that's not going to happen.
Okay, remember the scene.
But,
remember the scene.
So the Dryer building is now saved at this point.
That's the Dryer building.
The Dryer building was always called the Writers Building.
Where's the camera? What's on the other side? What's behind the camera where those pictures taken?
That's stage 18.
Stage 18.
That's where they're going to go in.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Now, when Norma Desmond goes in and DeMille meets her at the door, William Holden gets out of the car and he goes up the stairs to this office right there, and in there he sees Nancy Olson, and they have this discussion in the office. Hit the next slide.
Currently in that office is Adam Nimoy, Leonard Nimoy's son, who's working on a documentary that just finished about his father.
I met him there. I didn't know who it was.
Tribeca Film Festival this coming weekend.
There, hold it. That's the actual office where they shot in. They stuck the camera where we are standing, right? The guy was standing right in the corner of this tiny office. That's exactly how it looks today, except they have a desk and a chair, which is newer. And that's Billy right there. And they shot it at night. You can see outside here, it's dark. And they actually shot it in there. And I made up this picture, and I gave it to somebody in that office. Maybe,
That's Dave Zappone.
So I gave it to him.
I was with him yesterday.
Yeah. Very exciting. I interviewed Billy Wilder about this film extensively, and he told me all kinds of stuff that you would never know. But we won't go into it now because that's another lecture.
This is one of the great photos because it has everything in it. There's Alfred Hitchcock, the director.
There's Alfred Hitchcock.
And then you have Wendell Corey with the wine. James Stewart, and then you have Grace Kelly. You can see they're all preparing for the scene, as well as the camera and the lights and the whole crew.
She's thinking of her lines.
This is on stage 18. When they did Rear Window, they built the entire, if anybody's familiar with the film, James Stewart breaks his leg, and I hope I'm not like ruining it for anybody, but if you haven't seen it in like 55 years, I guess it doesn't matter. But he's home in his apartment, and he looks out into this courtyard of homes that are behind him while he's recuperating, and he thinks that he may have seen a murder. And
you have to see the film.
That whole entire set
was
built within stage 18, so it was built as one set, meaning that they didn't have to break it down, go to another stage and film a scene there. Everything was just done within the confines of stage 18 on the lot. Next. And that's it. So he's in his apartment and he's looking back, but this is when you walk into the sound stage, everything is right there.
You see how theatrical it is. It was done like a play. So you have this set here in the back. Each room is like a different scene going on, different characters everywhere. And he's watching everybody's lives, and the script intertwines everyone, leading to one guy murdering his wife, which leads this whole suspense. And he has this broken leg, he can't move. So everything is done by remote control. Grace Kelly does stuff for him, everybody does stuff for him. And finally the murderer is coming to get him in his own apartment, and he's defenseless. It's really great suspense.
Has anybody seen the film? Who plays the murderer?
Raymond Burr.
Thank you.
Harry Mason, can you believe him as a murderer? That mouse.
The blonde hair. My dad was almost a double for Raymond Burr.
Oh, you're
he
kidding.
used to watch Perry Mason all the time.
Oh, wow.
So I'd sit there as a kid and I'd go, Dad, I think he liked the show. because you look like Raymond Burr.
Yeah, maybe so. Ain't that something?
Would it behoove Paramount to keep this standing set, or would Alfred Hitchcock say, no, you've got to strike
that's
the set?
it.
Oh,
You
no,
know,
no saving.
We were talking about this today. I was with some people from Robert Edmunds' office, and they were asking me some questions. And I said, when they're making these movies, when Marlon Brando made a film, he thought every film was good. You know what I mean? When he did Tea House at August Moon, he didn't think, nobody's going to want to see this 50 years from now, but The Godfather's going to become a classic. They just do the movie, and then that's done. And then what happens afterwards, and the film builds and becomes like, why is a movie, why are we still talking about Rear Window, but we're not talking about another Hitchcock film? So they don't know. When they're doing it, they're thinking that their work is good, and nobody knows that it's going to, when they did something like It Hot, they didn't realize, it's going to be nominated for all these, awards through the years and be counted as the AFI, one of the best films ever made. It's just another film that they made. So when they did Rear Window, I don't think that they thought anything any more special than any other film that they were doing at that time.
Well, I'm not implying that they would keep it for sentimental reasons, but for practical reasons for another film.
What they would do is, Paramount was very, very bad about keeping their archives. They didn't save anything. Everything went into the dumpster. That's why Marc's got so many pictures.
But what he means is sometimes they did save flats, they did save walls, they did save some windows to use in other films. Yes, they did.
Used 100 times.
Yeah.
And then same thing with the costumes. Like the guy that does the archive with the costumes, he said like if Audrey Hepburn wore a dress and they needed it shorter in the next film for Grace Kelly, they just cut the dress and used it again. They didn't say, oh, this was Audrey, Audrey Hepburn's dress from Breakfast at Tiffany's, and we shouldn't, use this anymore. They just, re-altered it and then used it again and again and again until it was just holes in it, and then they throw it out. Like
the outside set, exterior sets as well. They save that.
It's funny how some people, they're so concerned about making money that they cost themselves tons of money later.
Paramount was good for that.
Yeah. Well, that's the Poverty Row. Check out my book, Early Poverty Row Studios. That's the Poverty Row. What?
On sale here.
On sale here. And it's a plug. And in there we talk about how the Poverty Row Studios would save money by making their administration buildings or other dressing room buildings partially a set, just like on this lot, as we're going to show you. That the dressing room building, when it was built in 1926 and 7, they designed it as a Tudor-style building with different designs all the way down to use for different scenes. But it was a working dressing room building. Okay, next. Oh, you did it right. This is this theater was the El Capitan Theater, which it is today. It was a legitimate theater for years and years until 1941, when RKO needed to premiere Citizen Kane, and they needed a special theater. And they got the lease on this theater, and they built a screen into it, and it became a movie theater. And then Paramount purchased it, and it became Paramount Hollywood until not too long ago. And then now it's the Disney El Capitan.
This is across from the Chinese Theater. Jimmy Kimmel shoots his show right next door to that. If anybody's not familiar.
Next.
I'm trying.
I know.
We got new batteries. I just think it goes on.
It's not supposed to do that. You have to push it twice. Look, if worst comes to worst, I can do it manually on there, but why don't you just do it manually? There. Now, every studio had a commissary, of course. At Paramount was called the Continental Cafe. There were several different names. Here it looks pretty plain. Nothing special. None of the studios had any fancy fronts to their commissaries, but every studio had them. And remember I told you about that special menu that DeMille had done, in which everybody signed it that was there. DeMille signed it at the bottom, and it said, "Seat to the 10 Commandments. Good advice," it says, from Cecil B. DeMille. Keep the 10 Commandments. And up there are people like Jerry Lewis signed it, Anthony Quinn, Cornell Wilde, God, I can't see. Elvis Presley's there. Let me point them out.
Dorothy
Sorry.
Lamour.
Donald Trump.
Damn these things. No, there's Elvis
Dorothy Lamour
Presley,
signed
Nick
it,
Adams,
Dottie
Anthony
Lamour.
Perkins. There's
There's Dorothy Lamour.
Dottie, she
Lamour.
called herself Dottie Lamour.
Hugh O'Brien.
Danny Kaye, right there. Hugh O'Brien. Remember Wyatt of Wyatt Earp?
Anthony
Well, there's
Perkins.
Nick
top
Adams
left.
of The
Anthony
Rebel.
Perkins
William Holden.
is, where is he?
Top left, Mark. Anthony Perkins at a
just saw
slant.
it.
Come down 3, 4,
Yeah, he's-
4
there it
He's
is.
right about
There
Jerry
you go.
Lewis.
Bob Hope,
Fess
Jerry Lewis. Oh, Bing Crosby.
Charles Boyer, Audrey
Yeah.
Hepburn.
So it's pretty neat. It's a neat one. And I have that original one. I mean, not the original signed one, a copy of it.
In that little box where it says Paramount Specials, it has things like Jerry Lewis.
Well, it
and
says
all-
Bob
and
Hope
They're all
cocktail.
gags. Like a Jerry Lewis sandwich is like bologna on rye with eggshells or something like that on it. And in the book, I think you can see
Yeah,
it.
Bob Hope
Stevens.
cocktail, Jerry Lewis special, Dean Martin special, English something and eggs, Anthony Perkins sandwich, Peter Baldwin sandwich, and strawberries Heston. Okay, next.
There's Dino.
Speak of Dean Martin here, and
Anthony Franciosa.
Anthony Franciosa. That's right. I forgot the name of the film,
Notice
but
they have
that's
career
Eugene. That's the
paper
director.
towels in their
Barney
collars to
Balaban's
keep
son-in-law.
Mark?
Yeah.
It's
Anthony
called
Franciosa
Career.
was bad.
Career.
So-
It's called Career, and that's Eugene Nicolesco, the director, right there.
Daughter's second husband.
So what?
And
They would
there's one of the
sweat or
guards.
something?
Well, it was for the makeup. So while they were, doing, this is probably just like a camera test. You see the script guys, they're maybe going over. Dean looks like he's saying like, "What?"
No,
You
they're
know,
going over their lines. I'll tell
going
you why I
over their
know
lines.
is that
so they
they're
went
wearing.
in, they made them up, and they don't want to get any makeup on.
That's
their
right,
shirts.
these
So
are
once
ma-
they
that's-
go to
that's
shoot
tissue.
the scene, they'll take that tissue out.
That's the tissue, and they're going. See the two script people. These are the script. One is the continuity guy. One is the dialogue director. Next. I love this shot. Again, I forgot the name of the film. It's in the book, and
Artists and models.
that is
Martha.
Martha Heyer and Jerry Lewis, and apparently she's pretending to have painted this painting, which looks pretty bad.
And this is on New York Street. And if you notice above their heads, there's those things are attached to wires that go across, and that's what they would use to make rain at that.
They had hoses attached, and they would move around back and forth with the rain coming down. They still have it. But they have sprinklers now on the roofs for the rain scenes.
This is my favorite picture. That's Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz leaving the Gower Street
Yeah,
entrance.
let me explain that real fast, real quickly about Lucille Ball was an RKO star for years, and then she got into TV with her husband, etc., etc. They started the I Love Lucy show. The pilot was shot at Columbia Square, Gower and Sunset, which has been, thanks to Hollywood Heritage, been restored. Of course, there's big buildings going on behind it, but we restored and saved the whole front, including the original TV and radio stage that's there. Isn't that great? So that's where the first I Love Lucy show was shot. When it was a success, they moved it because they needed a bigger studio audience. They moved it to the
Studio.
general service studio. No, this is different.
Okay.
So to the general service studio, where we were there for about 12 years, or 7 years, and then they bought with the Desilu. They bought a studio called the Motion Picture Center Studio on Cahuenga, and that was called Desilu Cahuenga. So they owned already, they left the Hollywood Center, they didn't own that, and then they bought RKO, it's 1957. So they were, and also RKO owned the RKO Pathé Studio in Culver City. So that's where the Untouchables was shot, and Whirly Birds, and all that kind of business, where Selznick shot Going with the Wind. They had the whole back lot, the 40 acres. So they were made, and they had the RKO Ranch in Encino. So all of this was a major studios. Little by little, all of this was gotten rid of, leaving them with two studios, the Gower Street Desilu and the Cahuenga Desilu. So that explains that. So here they are actually coming out of the Gower Street entrance.
Lucille Ball started as a contract girl, taking acting classes at RKO, and she went on to purchase the company that she worked for. So that's like the ultimate success. But while there, their marriage was deteriorating at this point, and they wound up splitting up. Lucy was doing the Lucy show on Stage 25 at Desilu,
which is now referred to as Lucky Stage 25 because Cheers went in there, then Frasier.
That was all 1968, 69, 70.
And it became too much for her doing the show. Trying to operate the studio because they were pretty hands-on, and she wound up selling it in '67 to Gulf Western. And
who's that guy? He's
who
an
is
actor.
that guy?
I think he's an actor.
So, and that's the entrance. What it looks like now. This is one of the last times that it was open. They actually shut the entrance off after all those years, about a year ago. And but it's still
Why did they shut off the Gowers?
We were talking about it.
They moved it to go down. There's another entrance down further. Somebody said because it wasn't handicapped accessible, but when you're talking about a movie studio, they just built Chinatown for Will Smith so he could have a fist fight with somebody, and it's all concrete, and they're knocking it down. So
again, who knows why?
Who knows why?
But look, at least they didn't take it away. At least it's there.
And it's still used actively. When you go through those doors, there's offices in there, and you could actually, when you go in, there's steps to go up. And when you go through the doors to get to the office, you go out the other side, and it leads to what they call Lucy Park.
Lucy Park.
Now, I found this on eBay. Would you believe that? It's a slide. And it was during the making of The Buccaneer with Yul Brynner, which is
with hair.
Which is there with hair. And this is the famous falconer. His name was Falconer. I forgot his first name. He was the famous fencing master. I actually took a class from him in fencing once. He had a studio called the Falcon Studios on Hollywood Boulevard. He was very important, very influential. He trained Errol Flynn and David Niven and Ronald Coleman, everybody, in sword fights. So that's in the barn. That's the fun part about it.
On the Paramount
That's
lot.
in the barn on the Paramount lot.
This for obviously rehearsal.
That is holy grail for us Paramount barn people.
You can see in the back there's a heavy bag and stuff. There's some great Life magazine photos with Steve McQueen in that barn, in that heavy bag and stuff. I couldn't use them.
Yes, the barn was used as a gym for years and years and years, and a conference hall and a rehearsal hall.
In the first book, you'll see a picture of Fred McMurray in the barn actually boxing and working out, and some other people in the barn. There's a great shot in the first book of Joe DiMaggio and the baseball player, New York Yankee, and Donald O'Connor on stationary bikes in the gym.
This is another Holy Grail shot I found years ago. It says Hound Dog on the bike. They were
pointed out.
That's Hal, right there. And that's Hal Wallace, who produced his films at Paramount. Remember, he was at MGM, Paramount, and where else was he? UA?
Elvis, you mean? Or
yeah, Elvis.
Elvis did films for just about every studio.
Yeah, he was everywhere. Warner's, too.
He was signed with Paramount, and then right away they lent him to Fox to do Love Me Tender.
Oh, yeah, Fox.
Then he did 3 films for Paramount, and then went into the service.
And there's the Paramount Gate.
MGM was GIS Rock.
Here's the Paramount Gate from the north side, looking south.
There, and that's the Bronx.
He looks real happy too. Look at his smile.
He looks thrilled to get this bike.
Yeah, he's
You would
thrilled.
think that he would buy one.
As you look through the gate, are those the apartments that were?
No, that's Raleigh Studio right straight ahead.
That's the Raleigh Studio.
The apartments are to the right of that gate.
Under the awning, wasn't that payroll under the awning?
Yes, payroll was under the awning, and the apartment house he's referring to is called today the Valentino Building on the lot. Has nothing to do with Valentino. It's just honorarily named because I named all the buildings at Paramount, but I didn't name them each one. I gave them all the names, and they just arbitrarily named buildings. Next. Oh, this is real important shot. This is the making of the 10 Commandments. DeMille is in the B tank with the big sky backing. This is where they did the parting of the Red Sea shots. They filled the whole area there with special tanks, special water sluices that would roll the water in, remember? And then they roll the water in, and then they reverse the film to out. That's how they did it. But in the 1923 Ten Commandments, they did it with Jell-O. So they poured hot water into the Jell-O, and the Jell-O disappeared, and then they reversed the film, and it looks like it's parting. Cool.
If you're ever at Paramount, you'll see this big sky backing. Usually there's a bunch of cars parked in front of it.
if they're going to, when they fill that with water, they make sure that, obviously.
Remember Patriot Games? Remember the boat chase? Remember in Winds of War, the series, all the battles?
That picture, don't tell them.
Oh yeah. Okay, but one
this
important
is like the
thing.
jewelry. We need to erase that from your.
Well, don't forget,
disregard that.
mention the VistaVision camera. That's important.
Yes, if this damn thing will work. Everything doesn't work. That's the VistaVision camera, which was Paramount's widescreen process. They're very rare, and they exist. And the Academy, I'm on the technical committee of the Academy for the museum. We have one, and there are several other ones around the world. And also, look at that. That's the barn that was next to the B tank for years. And then they built the Western Town right adjacent to the B tank and in the B tank, and that's when the barn became part of the Western Town. It was like a train station, a barn, and other things.
I always say DeMille saved everything. He was the only one. He was very sentimental. He was responsible for moving the barn. Zucker didn't care. And he saved everything. I says if DeMille was alive now, his wife would call like boarders, and they'd clean the whole place out, and then there would be nothing left from Paramount.
When was this tank constructed?
It was 1938 was the tank.
And then
but the backing was later. It was 1946.
What year was the Western Town constructed?
They had different ones. The first one was in the 30s. Another one was late 30s. And then the Bonanza Street that we all know was built in 1951. The reason I know all this, I have pictures of every single Western Town through the years, and even them taking it away and putting new ones in. And remember in Bonanza, the Western Street, when you look west, there was this big rock.
Right.
That was covering up the Archeo Art Department building. That's why they put the rock there.
The rock always looks so phony on Bonanza.
I know, but they had to have a rock.
Yeah.
Now this is the DeMille building I was telling you about that he built. It was about 1934, 2 years after he came back. This is the DeMille Gate right here. It was his own gate, his own guards, his own parking lot, his own A-tank, as I told you, right next door to the building. And this is Marathon Street looking west to Archeo.
And this building's still there. A lot of Sacha Baron Cohen, his offices are in there, and a lot of producers and writers are housed in there. The gate is now down. If you go through there, if you've ever been on the lot, if you go through there, just to the right of it then is the Sherry Lansing Theater, and they call that Michael Bay Avenue now because he's been making some movies that are making money for them.
Yeah.
So the first flop, they'll be ripping those Michael Bay Avenue signs down. And that's Alfred Hitchcock, and we just thought that's a great shot because it's a candid.
There is confusion about Psycho.
Universal was a Paramount film. Alfred Hitchcock was disenchanted with the people at Paramount at this point, and he filmed he was making a back-end deal with Universal to go over there. He filmed Psycho at Universal, but it was still released as a Paramount film, and this is the classic scene of her in the shower, and he's directing her on how to.
And remember, the motel is at Universal, and I gave a tour there last year or the year before for these diplomats, and we were on the tour, and we went to the Jaws Lake, and the thing shot out, everybody laughing. God, it was pretty funny. And then we went to the Psycho place, and there was a car there with the hood up and the back, the boot up, and I'm saying, God, I never saw that before. And some guy comes out carrying a body, an actor, and he's putting it in, and he stuffs it, and he looks at all of us, and he gets a big giant knife, and he comes walking toward our. And so then we scoot away. I thought that was the cutest thing. They laugh their heads off. They have two guys, I found out, two actors, do it all day, every day.
Do you think Alfred Hitchcock's frustration with the crew at Paramount was justified? Or why did he film?
I don't know all those details.
I don't know the details either, but a lot of times there's creative differences. The guys that run these studios are businessmen whose bottom line is making money. And the guys that make the films are artistic, and they have their own vision about how they want to do things. And they are set on their artistic value of the film. They don't care if the movie makes money or not. So a lot of times that's why you have these problems. That's why directors and actors have such problems with each other. You know, it's no secret why Martin Scorsese used Robert De Niro, you know, in 12 different movies, or Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon made a lot of films together. Because when you find somebody that you like working with and they're on the same page as you want to do it. Martin Scorsese doesn't want to make a film and have to argue with the actor throughout the whole film on every scene about what he's looking for. So, you know, Hitchcock could have possibly, at that point, was just when Paramount was having trouble at that point, they were going through growing pains. Maybe he just didn't feel that they were going to get behind the films, his films, the way they did in the 50s when he was doing
Well, I thought
something.
from a corporate mentality, Paramount might be embarrassed that Alfred Hitchcock is talking down their crew, so then other directors are going to say, my God, maybe I shouldn't use Paramount Pictures.
Yeah, I don't know if he actually like publicly talked down. I just think that he was unhappy and he was going to go somewhere else.
Yes, we have to move on. Go on. What's your question?
Well, it isn't a question. The reason he moved to Universal was because he was tight with Lou Wasson. And when Wasson moved in and took over the company, they offered him a better deal than anyone else, including his own brother.
Because his TV show was MCA Universal too. So.
Right. And most of the pictures he made at Paramount were wholly owned. Anyway, they were owned by him, not by Paramount.
Right. Well, that was the same deal Jerry Lewis had. Jerry Lewis is all his Paramount films. After 5 years or 10 years, everything reverted back to him. Paramount did. So Jerry Lewis owns all his movies now. That's why you don't see them out released with the Paramount logo. They're all owned by Jerry Lewis. And if you go on a lot, they really don't talk about him much. For a guy that spent so many years there and made a lot of money for them, but they don't really talk about Jerry Lewis a lot. This photo is Breakfast at Tiffany's, obviously. This is the last scene in the film where she's in the cab and she lets the cat out and she gets out and she's looking for the cab and they kiss. And Blake Edwards directed the film. You can see there's a stagehand there who retrieves the cat, whose name was Cat in the film. That was his name. And then George Peppard and Audrey Hepburn are looking to Blake Edwards because they're getting soaked with rain to say, hey, did you get the shot or do we have to do this again?
It's the dog, the cat.
A great shot. And George Peppard was really full of himself at this point when he's making this film. And at one point, him and Blake Edwards got into a near fist fight where they had to be pulled apart just because George Peppard was just being such antagonistic during everything that Blake Edwards wanted him to do. Just what I was talking about when directors and actors meet and try to work together. You have anything to add?
Elvis, G.I. Blues,
Julia
Norman Torod,
Rouse.
the director, cameraman Griggs. What's his first name?
Loyal.
Royal Griggs. Loyal.
Elvis
Thank
Presley got drafted at the height of his fame, while everybody else was going into the service and going on special duty and stuff. At this point, Elvis was liked by the kids, hated by the adults. So his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, thought, well, I know how to endear him to everybody and make him the great American boy. We'll just have him go into the service for 2 years like any other soldier. So that's what he did. I don't think Elvis liked it too much, pulling guard duty and everything else, but that's what he did. So he winds up in Germany, freezing his butt off for 2 years in the tank division, which was actually a patent tank division. At that point, there was still hostility between Germany and the U.S., and they were right on the border there, according to guys. They were in the service with them a couple times. They got pretty hostile. But they said that there was somebody in the military that was assigned to Elvis to make sure that nobody messed with him, like other guys or anything like that. Like the last thing they wanted, the military wanted, was to have to report Elvis Presley was killed during some type of tank maneuver. But he was regular. So he gets out of the service, and he's still under contract to Paramount. And the first movie they put him back in is G.I. Blues, which was a huge, huge success.
Here's the date, May 2nd, 1960.
And he, the album wind up becoming like a platinum album, the soundtrack, and
I did it.
Oh, you did it. Okay.
It's working again.
So good.
For now.
And this is stage 18, and that's the ladies' man stage. Jerry Lewis, if you ever saw that, Jerry as Herbert E. Hebert. His girlfriend breaks up with him, and he's so distraught, and he leaves his hometown, and he goes to get this job, and he doesn't want to be around any women, any girls, he doesn't want to see them because he's so heartbroken, and he winds up getting a job in an all-woman's boarding house. This is on stage 18, and again, they built the whole entire house, as you can see, as one set on the stage. And if you never saw it, you have to. I always say Jerry Lewis might be simple, and we can sit here and say, Jerry Lewis is so simple, but I dare anybody to watch a Jerry Lewis movie for 10 minutes and not.
Right, and also was brought up tonight.
There's a great scene in there with Buddy Lester, and it's so funny.
It was brought up tonight that he was the first to use video assist.
He created it.
He created it, and also that it was brought up that each room was sound wired. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, he created the video.
It's a famous set,
what
actually.
Video assist is, if you don't know, what they would do is they'd film a scene, and they'd have to take the film and go to a theater to actually watch it. And if it wasn't done right,
there it is. There it is. There's the monitor.
Something
right
happened. They'd have to go back and then reshoot it again. What Jerry Lewis created was they'd film it and they could play it back immediately on a screen, so they could see if they got the screen, or if something came in, or a microphone was visible, or something like that.
Jerry Lewis was very technically oriented. He loved all this, and he was a pioneer in this. I didn't do it.
I did it.
This is
Natalie Wood,
in,
Steve McQueen, Robert Mulligan, and Alan Pakula in Love with the Proper Stranger.
Yeah, Love with the Proper Stranger, right. And shot in New York. But New York.
Shot in New York.
Yeah, but all the interiors and everything shot in the studio.
And it was a film, if you never saw it, it's not available on video, but it was, I couldn't believe it actually when I saw it, because what it deals, Steve McQueen is a musician, and he has a one-night stand with Natalie Wood, and she gets pregnant. So she tracks him down to the musicians union. And if you ever get a chance to see the film on TV, while they're in that first scene, this big heavyset guy comes walking through. He's an extra, and it's Richard Castellano, Clemenza from The Godfather. He's this guy that comes walking through. So she says, look, I don't want anything from you. I just need some money because, and they don't use the word abortion, but that's what she's alluded, that I want to have this abortion. And that's what the film is about. It's a very powerful film dealing with that subject. And I thought, geez, this was made in like 1963 or something, dealing with this subject had to be so, it's a racy subject now to deal with, let alone back then. And anybody know that guy? You might know his name. I know you heard.
He was a producer at Paramount.
Lyles?
A.C. Lyles.
Yeah.
A.C. Lyles was a kid in New York, and
Florida.
Florida, excuse me. And he was a usher in the theater at Florida, Paramount Theater. Loved Paramount, loved everything. And after school, he dreamed of one day going to New York and working for Adolf Zukor in his office. He eventually did graduate from high school. He went to New York, and Zukor met him or something. And
what happened was he's working in the theater, Paramount Theater in Jacksonville, Florida, where he was from.
Yeah, Jacksonville.
Kid, even before high school. Zukor comes to visit the theater. So when he goes, he says to Zukor, oh, Mr. Zukor, he says, someday I want to come to Hollywood and work for you. So Zukor says, yeah, great, kid. He says, I love you, dude. He says, keep in touch. So A.C. Lyles writes him a letter every single week. Every week he writes. So A.C. Lyles, Zukor's secretary, writes A.C. Lyles back and says, you don't have to write him every week. Just write him once in a while. So A.C. says, so then I wrote Zukor every week, and I wrote the secretary every week. So he saves his money because he's serious. He wants to go to Hollywood and work. Saves his money, takes a train from Jacksonville, Florida, out to California. He shows up at the Bronson Gate, and he says, I'm A.C. Lyles. When I was a kid, Adolf Zukor promised me a job. I'm here to work. So they call, and Zukor's office is like, get rid of him. So he's not leaving. So they know who he is because the secretary was writing this lady every week for years. So she goes, all right, well, let him in. So he goes in, and they don't know what to do with him. So they stick him in the mailroom, and he's got a job. So he works there, and he took many, many jobs throughout the company, and eventually he became a producer of B films. But all the movies that he produced, he bought in under budget, and they made money, so they kept him around. It has to be a record because he worked for Paramount for like 76 years until he passed away at, what was he, 99 years old when he passed away a couple of years ago, and he still worked there and still had offices. And he said that one thing that kept him there through all the changes and different management and this and that was he never criticized anybody. Like, in other words, if something was going wrong or he didn't think a guy was doing a good job, he never talked bad about anybody. Never said, oh, this guy's going to be gone or something. He always would say, I think he's doing a great job. I think it's, and you know, and everybody liked him, and he was able to stick around for many, many years. And there's Carol Baker. She's leaving. That door is right next to the Bronson Gate, which was the casting office.
This was Harlow, the film Harlow. And she's playing this young Harlow who's not known, and she's going to the casting office. It's about her career and her rise to fame. They publicized it like you wouldn't believe. And they made the biggest publicity over this Harlow picture. They had a Chinese theater business. I mean, it was something else. She was so glamorous in this picture. So it's one of the ones like these films about Hollywood that they were doing in the 60s.
They actually did two
popular.
films about her. One was the Paramount, right? And then Carol Lindley played the other one.
That's right. Carol Lindley played the...
Electronovision.
Yeah.
Now that is actually the casting office, but...
Well, here it is. Here's another shot. This is right here. She was walking right here. The casting office. This is the wardrobe building.
Edith
Bronson Gate. Edith
right
Head's office right up there. And the payroll is right here. Or this could be casting, actually. Payroll was around the corner. But this is Bronson and Marathon Street. There's Bronson's sign, and right there, where you can't see it, right to the right, was the restaurant.
Mickadell.
No.
Lucy's.
No.
No.
God.
Oblast.
Oblast. Thank you. God, it's good to have people here. I can't think of everything. Oblast is like one of these restaurants that followed Paramount from Vine Street to here and stayed there for many, many years. I actually ate there. Everybody ate there.
And Michael and Marc, the mailing address infamously went from 5451 Marathon to 5555
Melrose.
Yeah. Okay, why don't you talk about this one? This is his favorite shot.
You know why? Because nobody knows about this. Paramount had a really bad fire in 1983 that took down New York Street, and we'll see some pictures of that. But this fire came before that. This was 1965. Nevada Smith was a Steve McQueen movie that finished. So you can see there's tables and stuff set up. They're going to have a party for Nevada Smith, and this fire starts. So they have to evacuate everybody. And you can see in the background there's something coming up there. I guess that's
a water.
Water that
stream.
they're trying to put.
But they couldn't save it. They all burned down.
Put this fire out, and again there was a fire. That was in the mid-60s, 1965.
All right, now
there's our Lucy.
Yeah, let me talk about this again. To refresh your memory, in 1957, Desilu Company purchases the RKO studios of Howard Hughes, who owned it at the time. And Howard Hughes wanted to unload it, and they wanted it. And from 1957 to 67, it was Desilu. But in 1967, as Michael explained, you know, she had to unload all this property. Was she divorced already from Desi by this time?
If they weren't divorced, they were
separated.
In the process of being divorced.
So that was it. So that's Charles Bluedorn, who was the head of Gulf and Western, and this is the actual ceremony of cutting the film to join the two lots together. It's a great shot. You're talking about him.
Well, Robert Evans, who did the forward for our book, and he's a great guy, and he likes me, so I like him. And he did a book signing there, and I was assigned to take care of him, and we worked together that day, which helped solidify our relationship. But he was, Evan Picone was a clothing company that his brother started with a tailor named Picone, and he was working sort of like on Broadway, doing some nonsense plays and stuff like that, and
and he gets involved with the brother's company. And at that time, you know, girls were just wearing dresses and they weren't in the. So he thought, well, how about girls probably wear slacks? So he goes into these small towns, like go into Milwaukee, and he called morning show. He's a pretty smart dude, and he said he knows that the morning show needs to fill airtime. So he goes, hey, I'm with the Evan Picone Company. I'll come in and we'll put a fashion show on for you. So they said, great. So he'd fly in, put the girls in slacks. He'd have local models. They'd all be wearing the slacks. All these ladies would go to the local stores to buy the slacks. Nobody would have them. So the Evan Picone's the only one making them. They call Evan Picone Company. And they start. So Robin Evans says, I've been in ladies' pants since I was in my early 20s. And that's a joke about that. So while he's doing this, he comes out to LA and he's staying at the Beverly Hilton Hotel. And he's at the pool. And Norma Shear and her husband at the time are at the pool. And her husband approaches Robert Evans because Universal's doing Man of a Thousand Faces, and James Cagney is playing that part, and they need somebody to play Irving Thalberg. So you say, hey, son, are you an actor? He goes, not anymore. He says, I'm in women's pants. And they said, my wife wants to meet you. Who's your wife? Norma Shear. Goes to her. They bring him over to Universal. Now he starts another acting career doing this stuff, but he's not very good. He gets signed at Fox to a contract. Him and Robert Wagner were the two RJs at the time at Fox. Things didn't work out so well, but he realized that he wanted to be a producer. He options a book called The Detective, which was made with Frank Sinatra, but Fox owned it. He winds up, Charles Bluhdorn buys Golf Western. Peter Bart worked for the New York Times. He does a story about Robert Evans and how he's this like up and coming producer. Charles Bluhdorn reads the story and thinks that Robert Evans is like a big deal, and you know, this guy did a New York Times story on him. He hires Evans to be a producer. When he goes to leave Fox, they say, if you want to leave, you need to leave The Detective with us. So The Detective stayed at Fox. Robert Evans takes the job with Paramount as their head of production, and the trade papers go crazy. They actually called the headline, read in, I think, Variety, they called him Bluhdorn's blowjob. They said that if Paramount came in as money-making as the 10th studio, they were going to come in 11th with Robert Evans as the head of production. That's how bad they talked about him. But
why were they so nasty?
But because he was a B-movie actor, and they hire him to run the studio. So, you know, it wasn't, I guess they felt that there was a lot of other people at that time more qualified than Evans. So he hires him. Here's a picture when he gets hired. Him and Adolph Zukor is welcoming him to the studio. But when he comes in, out of the gate, he's got his pulse on what people want. So he takes the studio in a different direction. They come out with The Odd Couple, big money maker. Even though Howard Koch produced it, because Koch was leaving and it was still in production, but Evans was in there when the film came out. From there, he hires Roman Polanski, and they do Rosemary's Baby. Now, the backstory on that is she's married to Sinatra. Sinatra's making The Detective, the thing that he owned, and he doesn't want Mia Farrow, who he's married to, doing Rosemary's Baby. So he calls Evans and he says, they better be done by, you know, whatever, March 1st or something, because she needs to be here doing this film. So he doesn't know what to do because they're not going to be done, and he doesn't want to like ruin his production. So he says he appealed to her sense as an actress, and he called her in to watch the, you know, they put like a rough draft of the film up to say, and he's telling her, look, you're doing such a great performance, and everybody's going to know you from doing this and this and that. So he's like talking her into not leaving to go to Sinatra. Well, Sinatra gives her an ultimatum. If you ain't here, then that's it. Well, she didn't go. And they said Sinatra never even called her after that. He sent Mickey Rudin, who was his attorney, to New York where they were filming with the divorce papers, and he went into her trailer. But the whole time Sinatra's calling Robert Evans and threatening him and this and that about it. Rosemary's Baby comes out, big hit, True Grit. Then they had Goodbye Columbus, which is a forgotten film, but a great, great movie with Richard Benjamin and Ally McGraw.
Michael, I'm confused. Did Sinatra want Mia to be providing acting duties or spousal?
He was supposed to play the Lee Remick role in The Detective.
Oh, okay.
So Sinatra's love interest in The Detective, Lee Remick,
And he wanted his wife, who was Mia Farrow at the time, to play.
I
that
saw
part.
The Detective just over Christmas on DVD. Lee Remick is much more mature and beautiful than Mia Farrow.
Right, but he was married to, I mean, first of all, he was friends with Maureen O'Sullivan, Mia Farrow's mother. When Mia Farrow was a little kid, he's partying with her parents. He was 50, she was like 20. So
Is that The Odd Couple?
that's The Odd Couple
Right.
there. So this comes out, and that's the director of The Odd Couple there, directed Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon. This is one of the last scenes in the film. This was done in New York on a rooftop. This is the producer's building. It's Robert Evans with, you know, some of the
Lee Marvin
people
from
that-
Paint Your Wagon.
Let them name them.
Okay.
Does everybody know who they are?
All right, who's that?
Barbara Streisand.
Yeah,
Yes.
and what film? For Paramount?
On a clear day.
Yes, On a Clear Day. That's
Bernard Donenfeld. You'll
Right.
never get that. He was a VP that worked under
Clint
Robert
Eastwood in
Evans.
Paint Your Wagon. Paint Your Wagon.
Yves Montand.
Yves Montand in
On a clear day.
On a Clear Day. Wayne.
True Grit.
True
True
Grit.
Grit. And
Rock Hudson.
and in
The Red Tin.
Darling Lily.
Darling Lily. That's right, Darling Lily.
If we had cigars, you'd win one.
Okay, what do you think this picture is?
Arthur
The story.
Yeah, Mark,
Yeah.
you know the whole story behind the still you just had?
The what? The what?
The story behind the still of the people standing on the stairs?
No.
They stood and waited for half an hour for Julie Andrews and she didn't show up.
Oh, right. Yes.
So they took the picture.
I heard that.
Oh no.
Yeah, Julie Andrews stood him up.
At this point, Paramount was still
It was intentional.
losing money, and they were going to sell the back half of the studio off to the cemetery. They wanted to buy it. So Evans, in a panic, his offices weren't even on the lot. Him and Peter Bart held offices in Beverly Hills. It's small offices because they wanted to use everything on the lot for production. He gets Mike Nichols. He goes on the set of a show called The Defendants, and he films this. You can actually watch this short film. It's about 5 minutes long on YouTube. It's on there. And Evans makes a plea to the board of directors not to sell off the back lot. That he's got all these movies coming out, and he knows that these movies are going to make money, but just stick with me and give me a chance. Don't sell the lot off. And he flies all night to New York. He walks into the board of directors meeting. He said, I'm not going to address it. Just watch this film and then make your decision. And in the film, that this is what he asked him to do. And he tells them that he's got Love Story coming out. And he thinks it's going to be, he calls it Paramount's Christmas gift to the world. So he's got Love Story. He says, we purchased a book called The Godfather. He says, and we think that that's going to be very successful. We have, and he names all these different films that they have coming out. And they stuck with him. And Love Story wound up making, I think, $160 million. This is like 1970, 1971 money. And winds up saving the studio.
They got the cover of Time magazine.
Yes, and made Ally McGraw a huge star. He married her at that point. They had a baby together. Then The Godfather comes along. And there was many, many problems between Evans and Francis Ford Coppola with The Godfather. Some good, some bad. Some was about casting and this and that. Evans is so consumed with The Godfather. Ally McGraw, he forces to make The Getaway, which was a Warner Brothers movie with Steve McQueen. She didn't even want to make the film. She said, Evans, I don't want to make this film. He goes, do it, because he wanted her sort of like out of his hair because he was consumed with The Godfather. She goes off to Texas with Steve McQueen and winds up having an affair with him. And then that's the end of his marriage to her.
Yeah, but
he made the classic film.
Yeah, but there's another but. When Robert Evans was doing his book, he wanted me to do the cover for his book, to come up with something great. I did. I went to his house to bring him these pictures from the Chews, and I went into, he has two houses, like a compound in Coldwater Canyon. So I parked my car and I went into the first house. It's a big office and a screening room and everything. And there's a woman typing, on some computer there. So I said, excuse me, where's Mr. Evans? It turns around, it's Ollie McGraw. They stayed friends all these years.
Wow.
Interesting.
If I have pictures and he's going through the pictures, he wants all the pictures of him and Allie. But they do have their son together and a grandson now, so they're still close. They see each other, and there's still a love there.
Okay, you put this in for a reason.
Well, because it's
For that
Lucy
office?
Park, there's Lucy's office. This is the other end of those doors that we saw Lucy and Desi coming out of. This is the other end of that. That door, if you look all the way to the right,
Gower Street's on the other side.
that's the door. If you go through there and you come out on Gower Street on the other side.
What's his name again, the director?
Rod Steiger.
No, the director.
Arthur Hiller?
Arthur Hiller,
Arthur
thank
Hiller.
you. I saw him at Nate Now's not too long ago. God, is he old.
He's on
All white.
Wow.
All white hair.
He's on
Yeah.
oxygen,
Had white hair
too.
for a long time.
Really old. Anyway, there's the Paramount Gate, and that's of course W.C. Fields and Me. That story that was written by his mistress, and it apparently did very well. I heard that W.C. Fields and Me did well, and they're shooting it right on Bronson. And there's Oblats.
Yep. Oblad's Cocktails and Cafe.
Can you back up and just talk a few
Back up.
sentences about
Good luck.
why was Robert Evans and Peter Bart not in offices at Paramount? They were in Beverly Hills. It sounds like, was it more convenient for them? Was there really that much production that there
Did they
weren't
help-
two empty offices for them?
They had very small offices in Beverly Hills.
Many producers were not even on the lot. They had their own offices
But I
for
mean, for
years.
the heads of the studio, you'd think they should be at Paramount.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Because it was trendier. They were on Cannon Drive next to what became the great restaurant.
Romanoff's.
No.
The Bistro.
Bistro.
Okay.
Bistro.
And they just wanted to be in Beverly Hills. The building is still there.
Okay, everybody, do you recognize this group?
Night shift.
This is the new TV division
Oh, no.
of Paramount, and this is this is a
Days of
combination
Marc
of I'm not Cheers, excuse me, but Happy Days and Mork and Mindy.
And Laverne and Shirley.
And Laverne and Shirley, excuse me. There's Cindy Williams right up there, and
Penny
so-
Marshall, Pam Dauber,
Yeah, they're
Robert
all
Williams,
here.
What building is this?
This is it's called today the William S. Hart Building, which I indirectly named. But it's William S. Hart had nothing to do with this lot. But it's the writer's building for RKO for years. A.C. Lyles had his office there, and Gene Roddenberry had his office there as well.
The Hart Building's directly across from Stage 19. And if you're facing the building, there's an office on the bottom right. Gene Roddenberry, that was his office, and that's where he created the Star Trek show, wrote the Star Trek show. When he vacated that office, at some point then Gary Marshall took over. Gary Marshall had Happy Days, and then of course he created Laverne and Shirley. He did a show called Out of the Blue, which didn't work, and then he had Mork and Mindy also, and they were all done within that office. Then some years later, Scott Baio, who was on Happy Days, he does a show called See Dad Run, and he takes over that office. So they asked Gary Marshall to do a guest spot on that show. One of the guys that was on that show is a producer I know. And Gary Marshall comes in, he goes in Scott Baio's office, and he goes, "Get the hell out of my office."
Now this is an interesting shot. This was taken around 1964, I think. But the point about it is, you see the KMEX TV building. That was the original KTLA television station, which was owned by Paramount. Paramount started in TV in 1929. Adolf Zukor thought that they would stream, get this, not through an internet, but they would stream television into theaters somehow through television. Very interesting, like they're doing now, sort of. And over the years, it became KMEX because KTLA moved to the Warner Studio lot, became Paramount Sunset Studios for their KTLA division. And later, this was after Warner's left the studio, which became the Tribune Studio, and it's today the Sunset Bronson Studios today, where all these great TV shows were shot. And over the years, just like the Hollywood Center Studio was different shows. I mean, everybody had, remember the 50s and 60s were all these great shows, Leave It to Beaver and all this business. So that was that. There's the Bronson Gate, and these are all the buildings and stores that fronted Melrose, which Paramount in 1985 to 87 purchased all the property, demolished everything, and right on the right, the back is the warehouse for Western Costume Company, which we'll show you in a few minutes, or in a minute. This is now that's the Western town. I told you about the rock at the end of the street. Right behind the rock is the RKO Art Department building. So if you take the rock away, you'll see a building sitting there. So we can't have that.
And where would the DeMille barn be?
Oh, it's on the right. You can't see it. It's to the right, up the street.
If you ever see Bonanza, MeTV and these shows, they show the old shows, but the barn was the rail station in Bonanza.
Oh, okay.
I was there when they demolished it, as I told you, in 1979. And this is the demolition of the Western Street. And see, it reveals the sky backing and the old RKO water tower. And right on the other side of this is RKO Studio. In the B tank during the miniseries, The Winds of War, I didn't shoot this shot, but I was on the set when they were shooting all this. They covered the B tank up completely so they could put rain, rain spouts everywhere. They had wind machines, they had, turning up the water, and this battle of World War II that was in Winds of War, starring Robert Mitchum.
Right there on the Paramount Lot.
Now,
cowboy?
I don't know who that cowboy is, but in 1979, the National Park Service purchases the Paramount Ranch in Agoura. And I was a wandering minstrel at the Renaissance Fair. I was a musician once in another life. And so I stayed on at the ranch. I knew everybody there, and we rode horses there. It was a great place for me. And then National Park Service purchases the ranch. So I'm already a film historian. I have pictures of the ranch. So I was the spokesperson for the morning show, Channel 4, and that's
Pat Sajak.
Pat Sajak, thank you. It just escaped me
Wheel
again.
of Fortune.
He came here for the first time from Buffalo, New York, Wheel of Fortune, Pat, and we did a wonderful interview there about the history of the Paramount Ranch. So I again plug every year, every June and July, Hollywood Heritage Silent Society. We have screenings at the Paramount Ranch. You bring your dinner, you picnic, and then I give you a tour of the ranch for about 45 minutes, and then we have a wonderful film outside with live accompaniment. So I urge you to come.
Is it unusual that the National Park Service bought both Century Ranch, the 20th Century Fox Ranch, and Paramount Ranch, and they weren't developed?
Well, first of all, it was the state parks that got donated the Century Ranch, which is nearby.
Yes.
But the Park Service had to buy what was left of the Paramount Ranch. Is only a third of what was left.
So it's state and...
State and national parks, two different things.
Okay,
but we all work together. I work as consultant for both park services. Back to Paramount again.
Back to Melrose Avenue and the fire. This is 1983.
Right, and
Marc runs over with his camera.
I was working at Paramount at the time.
William Shatner's there. He tries to
see
the smoke. Pulls a hose out. He tries to.
That's not William Shatner. That's the fire department.
That is there. But
I took this shot as well to show you the how bad it was.
This is all real, folks. This isn't Hollywood.
This was really, for me, of course, my sets are burning. It was really bad.
Is this the same New York street that burned?
Yes.
Just in the previous pictures you showed us?
Yeah.
That was 1965. This
a part
is
of it.
1983.
A part of it, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, same New York Street.
The same
area.
Look, they had no sprinkler systems. It was just kindling, waiting to burn.
And you can see everything just went down. Now this is when they're rebuilding it, and you can see where the facade is and then what's behind it.
Yes, I came every week.
You can
I was
imagine
there.
how easy that goes up in flames. And this is when they're rebuilding it. But now looking straight ahead, that was the School for Bronx Zoo, where if you ever saw the TV show Everybody Hates Chris Rock show, that was his high school there. They use it in like Rizzoli and Isles for the courtroom building and things like that.
And also Star Trek
Straight
films.
ahead.
And it was, I think, used for Dear John with Judd Hirsch.
Dear John, yeah, Judd Hirsch.
Now you see how they're building this? These are built with steel frames this time, and also sprinkler system. So they're all sprinklered nowadays.
They actually shot right there on that street too. They shot The Artist, which wasn't a Paramount.
Yeah, The
film,
Artist
but I
was in
there
part
back
shot
then.
there. This is the dedication of New York Street in 1983?
1983, yeah.
83, I think.
Seems like yesterday.
No. Did it burn in 83?
Yeah.
Burned in 83.
Yeah, burned in
Yeah, but then it
83.
took them 6 months to clean it and rebuild.
I don't think
Could have
Just
been
for my own
early.
frame of reference, I came here in '84.
Yeah.
So after I came here, I remember a thing about the opening.
This
Could
is
have been
later than
early
'83 because
84.
that's Brandon Tartikoff.
Ah, it's 85 then.
And Brandon
Right.
Tartikoff was at
When's the
NBC.
80th anniversary?
I mean, it's in the book. I don't remember the exact date, but it was about a year after it burned. They rebuilt. So this is, and that's Brent Spiner there.
Sure
this is Donald O'Connor, Mayor Bradley.
This is the
You're
early
right.
1990s.
That's Tartikoff, and that's
Because
Darcy.
Brent Spiner,
Darcy
Star Trek's not till
Bob Hope.
Does
87.
it say it here?
Star Trek is 87. With Brent Spiner's
I can't
87.
read it, but I have it in the book. It's in the book.
There's
It's got to
John-
be 92. Is Paramount start 19?
If you go
12?
back, there was John
1912.
Candy.
And that sign said 80th anniversary.
Mark, if you go back, there's John Candy on the left without a necktie and a white shirt.
Okay.
Never mind. I can't go back. I'm afraid to. No, but you're right. I'll tell you, if I remember correctly
It
now.
says 1992.
I believe
on the
they
book.
built that section first, was in 85 or
1992.
something.
Yeah.
Then they
Yeah.
built Moron. That's right. That's when they
Right.
built the whole new Western Street, the new New York Street, which had all the different parts
You
and
were there when
sections.
that happened?
That was years later, by 19. You're
So
right,
you were working-
1991 or
you worked so
two.
hard
So they might have
because you
started
had
to
see Bob
rebuild it,
Hope.
but the
They
whole
did.
project wasn't complete.
It was over a period of years. Yes. To me, it's all one big
She was
blur.
there when they did the dedication, but she wasn't. They worked her so hard
I
at
remember
entertainment
that.
tonight that she couldn't.
I
do-
was there too. I sat next to
Now they're
Rhonda
working
Fleming
even harder.
and John Candy.
Oh, how about that?
I sat next to what's her name?
Dorothy.
Dorothy Lamour. I can't remember her name. Here's the Western Costume Building I was telling you about.
Does anybody know why they have the hoods up on those cars? Is it because of the
Nobody
heat?
knows that. But they did demolish all of this
Because
when they
of the cats,
purchased all the
the heat.
properties.
Like,
Down the
building
street.
gone?
Yeah, everything's
I
gone.
don't know.
Oh.
I was just curious.
This is
to
now
why
part
they-
of the parking lot there.
Those are pretty.
Then they built right near it, right on the warehouse section, the new Paramount Theater.
That stands there right now. It's a 560 feet theater, a huge lobby which they use a lot for different productions.
And then what's the date of the Windsor Gate? I forgot.
How are we forgetting?
90
All the hard questions.
95?
And no, I think
I
no.
can't remember the dates. You have to look in the book.
Hold on.
And,
And that's it, of course,
and that's
as it
what
is
looks
today.
like now when you're driving in, you
1991.
can see
I was right! See, I was right!
95.
No, it says Windsor Gate
1991.
That's a major
You can see the water tower.
Oh yeah, there's
right
the sky.
there
There's the
through
water tower,
gate,
sky
and
back,
the
and
others-
the B tank.
We learned at one of your talks that the water tower at Warner Brothers is not functional anymore. Is this water tower?
No, it's not
No.
anymore. No,
It's not. Okay.
no.
No,
Liability.
just
Too
there
much
for
liability.
decoration.
That's Sumner Redstone.
He's still alive. He's,
Barely.
Look, that's the
barely-
best picture I could get, so don't bug me about it, okay?
He's,
Is he at Paramount where this picture's taken?
Yes.
yeah, they actually named the administration building after him now.
I didn't
It's called
take the
Redstone
picture.
Building. So that building. is
Okay,
called
now
the
when
Redstone
Paramount
Building.
moved to Marathon Street, which wasn't Marathon yet, in 1926, they built the administration building, and it's done just like Spanish missions. It's Spanish mission. It's called Spanish Colonial Revival, and that's what this is. It's like what mission churches have. You know, as you enter, it has the rough adobe kind of walls, architecturally speaking. It has these motifs of old Spain. And this was the idea that many buildings in Los Angeles and Hollywood were done as, this style. And luckily, the powers to be at Paramount in 1985, when we were going to redo the lot, of course, a lot of people said we have to demolish all this crap and build new buildings. But there was a big hue and cry, I was one of them, that showed the old pictures of the history of the lot, and I think it swayed their opinion, and they restored everything, and then everything new that they built was built in this style, which it is today. Thank goodness.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. This is the RKO screening room, which
Gower
now
Theater.
is become the Gower Theater.
It's still in use.
And I remember in the old days, it was untouched since the days of the 20s and 30s. It was dirty, dark, but it was really historic. It's modern now, of course. There's the famous RKO corner of Bronson, at Gower and Melrose. And that is the famous earth with this famous electrical tower, you know, the radio tower, RKO, which would, on the top with neon, you know, would beep the Morse code or something or other. Now, in 1985 to 87, as I said, the Paramount lot was transformed. They purchased all the frontage on Melrose. And here's Marathon Street. They're putting in new piping and everything, and it's being made into a mall, a walking mall as it is today. So Marathon Street ceased to exist as a street. And that's how it is today. And you see how everything's been restored to the Spanish style.
Yeah, it's
And
beautiful.
everything, except for the Roman arch, which is a Roman arch.
They put a
with
fountain, you can
still.
see some
Yeah,
white
there's a
in front
fountain
of
right
it. They
there.
put a fountain right there in
Yeah.
front of the Bronson Gate now.
Night shots.
And there you see the fountain better in that picture.
Supposedly this was the wardrobe department. Supposedly that was Edith Head's office.
Edith Head there.
Back in the days when RKO was there, how strict were the two studios on letting or not letting employees go back and forth?
Oh, they were
between
not
the
strict. They
lots?
had two open. They had one pedestrian gate and one truck gate. And the truck gate was closed unless they were sharing, but the pedestrian gate was open. They went to each other's
So you can go visit a
commissaries.
secretary or go have lunch? or
Yes,
whatever?
yes. Like Raleigh does today with Paramount. It's
Okay.
interchangeable now.
And then we put Adolf Zucker in there
Right.
because
As a reminder,
all
and this is again, this is the end of our show.
And
Oh,
there's
wow.
the new book, and we hope that everybody.
Equipment worked, sort of.
We're here to sign.
All right, what
books.
questions do you have? I know you've been asking questions during the whole thing. Anything else? So
Yeah,
anyway,
I have
again, yeah, go on.
Yeah, double indemnity,
Yeah.
I love double indemnity.
Jerry's Liquor, or Jerry's Market. I understand it's part of Raleigh now, is that right?
Jerry's Market was right across the street from the Paramount, where it was in double indemnity, and it was transformed into a soundstage, which it is today. And next to it was the Mel Van Theater, which was a theater, Melrose Van Ness, which became the KTLA Theater.
Which later became the Continental Theater.
The Continental Theater, thank you. I used to see revivals there, that's right. More questions?
Well,
Where was it?
Next door to the Jerry's Market, which is on the south side of Melrose, right west of Van Ness.
So it is actually
Southwest
the
corner.
southwest corner.
Yes.
Okay.
It's now sound stages and office buildings.
There was a theater right there in that corner.
Yes.
We hear so much about how the old silent films like Nitrate Can't Wait and they're lost forever. Did you find that there were any still photographs, publicity photographs or marketing that perhaps were lost or discarded that you really wanted to put in the book but they don't exist?
Oh yeah, there's always that, but I've found so much that it's okay, but I'm always looking for holy grails, yes. Thank you, everybody.
Does anybody have books that they want signed?
Yeah.
Yeah, signing books, right now. Right here.
You know what? I'm coming back a second for Tom.
Just too much to talk about.
And did you want us just to sign our names, or?
I can.
Okay.